The issue has been, is should the Christian church allow coupled gay people with same-sex attraction to be members of God's kingdom and members of the Mennonite church?
Well, that question from Phil Wenger, a local man who married his husband Steve back in 2014. Now, Wenger's father was a Mennonite minister for 66 years and signed their marriage certificate. What followed made national headlines. Fox 43's Braden Long spoke with Wenger on his experiences and the power of his family and faith in tonight's Fox 43 focal point, LGBTQ in PA.
Central Pennsylvania knows Phil Wenger as the co-founder of the Isaac's restaurant and deli chain and as the current CEO of the Lancaster County Conservancy. But just 4 years ago, his father's open letter to the Mennonite Church about Phil's marriage catapulted him into the spotlight.
God made him that way, so that's the way I took him.
Since 1948, Chester Wenger spread Mennonite views across the world and with his 7 children. But his son Phil's religious beliefs were tested at a young age.
High school, I played a pretty traditional kid. I dated women. I never really was attracted to women, but that's what you did.
Phil came out in college and went to his father for guidance. They shared lengthy conversations about sexual orientation and religion.
All of those things brought him to this understanding that led him to, be a supporter of LGBT folks being welcomed in the church if they were in committed, monogamous relationships.
Some church members didn't share similar views at the time.
Then I got a bunch of written letters from the little old ladies that sit in the front row saying, repent, repent.
Soon after, at the start of a Sunday service in 1979.
And so they excommunicated me without any conversation.
With you or anybody else?
With me. Yeah, with me or anybody else.
Phil's father disturbed by the actions of his own church.
And he called the bishop up that represented that church, and the bishop and him had words, and the bishop wanted to talk to me. And so we met at a picnic table in the backyard at my parents' house, and we prayed together, and the bishop basically apologized for the way that it was handled.
Nothing changed. Phil was not welcome in the church, so he moved on. Founded Isaac's Restaurant and Deli in 1983. By 1986, Phil found his other half, who still remains 34 years later.
I really never fell in love. I really didn't. And then along came a night, in 1986 at a gay bar in Marietta, Pennsylvania, when this cutest guy in the bar was looking back at me and was interesting enough that I wanted to go over and talk to him.
Fast forward decades later, gay marriage legalized in the Commonwealth in 2014. Then 96-year-old Chester Wenger asked to do what he does best.
Around says, "Dad, will you marry us?" I said, "Yeah, if you want to." So that's the way we did it then. He didn't ask the mayor, he asked me. And I was proud to do that.
Dad said, "I pronounce you husband and husband." We had to work on that language a little bit.
I don't remember.
Word spread into the Mennonite community about what Chester had done.
People were calling him saying, "How could you do this? Why did you do this?" And everything.
Hoping the calls would stop, Chester and the Lancaster Conference of Mennonites came to an agreement.
Dad agreed that he would just keep it quiet, and they agreed that they were just going to keep it quiet, and they reached a peaceful understanding.
But when the calls didn't stop, Chester grabbed a pen.
He put together the epistle that was published, which was this whole sort of belief that gay people should be welcomed in the church. And he said Jesus would clearly have welcomed us.
Publicly declaring what he had done to the Mennonite press didn't come without consequences for the man who had been a Mennonite minister for nearly 7 decades.
So they made a decision they were going to remove his credentials. What they wanted to do was just make for sure that they said to all the other pastors in Lancaster Conference, "You cannot do this or you will lose your credentials or lose your job."
Then the viral sensation.
Steve and I were sort of caught up in something we never intended to happen, which was this whole social media frenzy.
Over time, the dust settled for the Wenger family. Phil went on with his work for the Lancaster County Conservancy. Chester still caring for his garden, combining his faith with a father's love.
That I love him, and I expect him to stay with his friend for life, and that we can be happy with each other wherever we are.
And a son's admiration in return.
My father is a really amazing human being.
Chester still maintains his deep faith and shares it with whomever asks. As for Phil, he continues his work with the Lancaster County Conservancy and hopes to continue uniting York and Lancaster counties along the Susquehanna River. You can expect more on this story on our website, FOX43.com.
He fired me, he kicked me out, but then ultimately he sued me.
Harrisburg Treasurer Dan Miller became the city's first openly gay councilman back in 2006. But in the decade prior, Miller got national attention after he was fired for being gay.
Fox 43's Braden Long spoke to Miller about his experience and how this can still happen today. Tonight's Fox 43 focal point, LGBTQ in PA.
It took nearly 30 years for Dan Miller to come out to his friends and family. The consequences of coming out took over his life for more than a decade.
I was on the news on every single station, and it's Dan Miller, gay activist, you know.
Dan Miller never intended to become the Harrisburg poster child for gay activism in the late 1980s. Living in the area all of his life, growing up, the gay culture wasn't familiar to him at all.
You know, that was a total revelation to me to think there were hundreds of, young men dancing at a club and drinking and having fun.
So when gay bashings became a growing fear by 1990, he decided enough was enough.
Had a meeting, wanted to be with the police. We wanted to get more police protection. Somebody had called the press, and none of us were prepared for that.
His appearance in the press, limited. It didn't garner that much attention. And in the 5 years he had been out to his friends and family, most of his co-workers still didn't know. That was until a confrontation with Harrisburg City Council.
Every time there was a city council meeting that we were supposed to go to, it got canceled or postponed. And so we thought it had to do with us. So we thought, well, we're going to go down there and confront them. And my friend called the television stations and said, hey, we're going to do this.
And the television stations showed up, plastering Miller all over TV screens of central Pennsylvania. At the time, Miller was working for Donald L. DeMuth Professional Management Consultants.
I'd been there 5 years. He wanted to make me a partner.
Miller says his boss, DeMuth himself, didn't see him on television until a client mentioned it. But at the time, Dan says he was working on a big project for the firm.
For 2 weeks, I went to work and nothing happened. I figured he was okay with it or whatever. But it was really until I completed that project, then he fired me.
Not knowing the potential legal questioning of his firing, Miller picked himself up and started his own firm.
Like within, 2 months, about a third of the clients came with me.
DeMuth sued Miller, citing a non-compete clause in his employment contract.
It was really devastating to me because, I was just an employee. He had all the power and the money, and I didn't.
And adding insult to injury,
he sent out a letter to the clients that went with me saying that he didn't know what my health status was, but that I could have AIDS, or I most certainly would be getting AIDS, and that therefore you couldn't rely on any kind of a long-term relationship with him as your accountant.
During the court proceedings,
yeah, he admitted that he fired me because I'm gay.
It's right in the court transcript. When questioned about if Miller was properly discharging his duties on the day he was fired, DeMuth said, not if he is a homosexual. The case caught national attention.
Every news show was calling me for interviews, and it got written about across the country. And
Miller even hit the cover of the New Yorker magazine. After multiple trials, the case ended in the Pennsylvania Superior Court. Dan lost, found guilty of violating his employment contract. Being gay in Camp Hill was officially validated as a legal cause for being fired. The township had no anti-discrimination laws for LGBTQ individuals. Miller was forced to pay DeMuth $156,000 in damages for violating the contract. He paid and went on with his life. A decade passed. Miller grew his practice, and in 2006, grew in politics.
I wanted to see, could we elect an openly gay person to city council?
Miller was elected to council. not without controversy. In his tenure as controller, a public battle with then Mayor Linda Thompson, accused of making homophobic remarks against Miller when their policies differed. Still, a new chapter. He then lost a close race for mayor in 2013. Now, he's the Harrisburg City Treasurer.
I thought it shows, that we're moving in the right direction, and it wasn't really used against me in the political process, and I was accepted.
I reached out to Donald DeMuth for comment. He asked for the letter that he sent to the clients and then did not further respond. As for Camp Hill, the borough now does have anti-discrimination laws to protect the LGBTQ community. 13 of the 15 largest cities in the Commonwealth do as well. But unless you live in one of those cities or approximately 40 other townships and boroughs with anti-discrimination protections, the case of Dan Miller could happen again. A full list of those townships are on our website, fox43.com.